You know, something about this week's federal budget just feels different. It's not just the numbers, or the usual political spin, it's the reaction. From Halifax to Vancouver, from coffee shops to Parliament Hill, Canadians are whispering the same thing: did Carney just betray the middle class? Because this time, it isn't just opposition politicians crying foul, it's ordinary people who feel blindsided. The very group that was promised relief, fairness, and stability, is now wondering if they've been sacrificed for something else entirely. Let's talk about what's really happening behind those shiny press conferences and carefully worded speeches. So, here's the story. Prime Minister Mark Carney walked into this year's budget announcement with one goal: to prove that his government could balance economic discipline with compassion. But what came out of Ottawa left many Canadians feeling anything but cared for. Higher taxes on so-called luxury items that somehow now include family SUVs, cottage renovations, and even certain home appliances. Reduced deductions for middle-income earners. New energy fees disguised as climate transition levies. And a freeze, yes, a freeze, on certain social benefits that were quietly indexed to inflation before. None of this was front and center in the glossy budget brochure, of course. You had to read the fine print, the kind buried in page 312 of an 800-page document. And once people started doing that, outrage exploded online. Hashtags like hashtag middleclass betrayed and hashtag Carney budget scandal started trending within hours. Families that were already squeezed by high mortgage rates and grocery bills suddenly realized their tax refunds would shrink, and their monthly costs would rise. But here's the twist: Carney insists this is all part of a responsible economic reset. He says Canada has to adapt to a new era of global volatility, supply chains, wars, climate costs, all the usual suspects. Yet critics say what he's really doing is testing how far he can push the average Canadian before the breaking point. You can almost feel the frustration boiling under the surface. Even some Liberal supporters are uneasy. There's talk that this might be the biggest political gamble of Carney's career, one that could either cement him as a visionary reformer, or brand him as the man who turned his back on working Canadians. Let's be honest, Carney's reputation has always been that of a numbers guy. The smart banker. The calm, collected economist who talks about balance sheets like their moral philosophy. But leadership isn't just about graphs and projections, it's about trust. And right now, that trust feels shattered. Across the country, people are comparing this budget to the quiet austerity of the early 1990s. Back then, governments cut spending in the name of responsibility too, but it came with years of job losses, crumbling services, and declining wages. Some economists are warning we might be walking down that same road again, just with a more polished smile at the podium. And it's not just the usual suspects speaking up. Even provincial leaders, some of them Liberal allies, are pushing back. Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba have all hinted they'll resist new federal levies that hit transportation and energy sectors hardest. Ontario has called for clarity. Quebec says it won't tolerate federal overreach in provincial tax collection. You can almost sense a storm brewing, the kind that starts with money, but ends in politics. Meanwhile, the people who this budget was supposed to help, the nurses, the tradespeople, the teachers, the small business owners, are feeling more invisible than ever. Many were hoping for real relief, something to ease mortgage renewals, some breathing room for rising grocery prices, maybe even incentives for local manufacturing. Instead, what they got was more bureaucracy and new, green transition fees that sound noble but sting at the checkout counter. It's almost poetic. Carney campaigned on protecting the middle class, and now that very group feels left behind. But here's the thing nobody's quite saying out loud: what if this isn't a mistake? What if this budget was never meant to help the middle class, but to reshape it? To squeeze it just enough that people start accepting a different kind of Canada, one where economic stability means personal sacrifice, and where equity means everyone gives up something, except the elite. You can call that speculation, but listen closely to Carney's language. Words like recalibration, transition, shared responsibility. He isn't promising growth, he's preparing people for limits. For less. For a new normal that doesn't look anything like the one Canadians were promised 5 years ago. And the reaction has been fierce. The opposition pounced immediately, calling it a cold-blooded betrayal. But what's striking is how much of the backlash is coming from non-political voices, unions, small-town mayors, even financial columnists who usually play it safe. They're all asking, who exactly is this budget for? Because one thing's clear, it isn't for the average household trying to keep up with 7% food inflation and double-digit insurance hikes. Then there's the debt issue. The government claims it's tightening spending, but buried deep in the budget summary, there's an increase in federal borrowing, billions more in transition funding. The catch? No clear explanation of where that money's actually going. Some call it a bridge fund. Others whisper it's a political slush reserve. Nobody knows for sure, and that uncertainty is what's fueling the outrage. The narrative being whispered across the country right now isn't just about numbers. It's about trust, and whether Canadians are being told the whole truth. Even inside Ottawa, leaks suggest not everyone in Carney's cabinet was on board with this direction. Some ministers reportedly pushed for stronger middle-income relief, direct credits, mortgage assistance, energy rebates. But those proposals didn't make the final draft. Why? No one's saying. You can feel the tension growing between the political class and the public. There's something raw in the air, that uneasy moment before something bigger breaks. Some commentators are already calling this a turning point. Not just for Carney's government, but for Canada's political landscape. Because if the middle class really starts to believe they've been written off, history shows what happens next, movements form, alliances shift, and the next election becomes a referendum on betrayal. And here's the chilling part, Carney doesn't seem fazed. In interviews, he's calm, confident, even detached. He repeats that same line, this is the responsible choice. Responsible to whom, though? The bond markets? The global climate funds? The IMF? No matter what happens next, this budget has already drawn a line in the sand. It's more than a financial document, it's a statement of values. And for millions of Canadians tonight, those values feel unfamiliar, maybe even hostile. As the dust settles, one question lingers over everything. Was this just tough love from a pragmatic Prime Minister, or the moment Canadians realized their government no longer speaks their language? Whatever the answer, one thing's certain, the middle class won't forget this budget anytime soon. And neither will Ottawa. Because once trust is broken, especially the trust of an entire nation's backbone, it doesn't come back easily. And when it does, it usually brings a reckoning with it.